South African Member of Parliament. Brian Molefe is a man who doesn't shy away from controversy. Recently, he has taken a bold stand against what he calls discriminatory practices by South African banks. Molefe alleges that these institutions are systematically closing the bank accounts of black individuals and businesses, while turning a blind eye to controversial white establishments. This practice, he argues, perpetuates the deep-seated economic disparities that continue to plague South Africa. The implications of these allegations are far-reaching, particularly for small businesses and entrepreneurs who rely heavily on access to financial services. Molefe's claims have shaken the South African financial sector, sparking a heated debate about systemic racism and economic inequality. Many black South Africans find their lived experiences reflected in Molefe's accusations, pointing to a long history of financial exclusion and discrimination. The financial struggles faced by many black-owned businesses are often attributed to this lack of access to capital and financial services, a direct result of the legacy of apartheid. Molefe's stand has brought these simmering tensions to the forefront, demanding accountability from institutions that hold significant power over the economic well-being of South Africans. The impact of these alleged discriminatory account closures on black-owned businesses is particularly concerning. For small businesses and entrepreneurs, a bank account is not just a place to store money, it's a lifeline. It's the foundation upon which they build their credit, secure loans, and access crucial financial services. When these accounts are arbitrarily closed, it can cripple a business, forcing it to shut down or operate in the informal sector with limited growth potential. This perpetuates a vicious cycle of economic exclusion, where black-owned businesses are systematically disadvantaged, hindering their ability to contribute to the South African economy. Molefe's bold stand against these alleged discriminatory practices has brought to light the urgent need for transparency and accountability within the South African banking sector. It is a call for justice, for fairness, and for an end to practices that perpetuate economic inequality and stifle the economic potential of black South Africans. His unwavering stance has ignited a crucial conversation about the role of financial institutions in dismantling the legacy of apartheid and creating a more equitable society for all South Africans. This is a conversation that needs to continue, not just within the halls of Parliament, but in boardrooms, in homes, and on the streets, until real and lasting change is achieved. Molefe's allegations sent shockwaves through the South African Parliament, sparking intense debate and discussion. A joint meeting of the Portfolio Committee on Trade, Industry and Competition and the Standing Committee on Finance was convened to address the issue of bank account closures, bringing together lawmakers, industry representatives, and concerned citizens. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension, as Molefe passionately laid out his case, his words resonating with many who had experienced similar injustices. The parliamentary hearings provided a platform for a broader discussion on the lack of transformation and discriminatory practices within the South African financial sector. MPs from various political parties echoed Molefe's concerns, highlighting the slow pace of transformation and the continued dominance of the white minority in leadership positions within banks and financial institutions. The lack of representation in these institutions, they argued, was a contributing factor to the discriminatory practices being alleged, as it fostered a culture that was insensitive to the needs and experiences of black South Africans. The issue of bank account closures brought to the fore the urgent need for legislative changes to address the imbalance of power between banks and their customers. MPs from across the political spectrum acknowledged the need for stronger consumer protection legislation, particularly when it came to the arbitrary closure of bank accounts. The current regulatory framework, they argued, was inadequate in protecting the rights of customers, especially those from historically disadvantaged backgrounds who often lacked the resources to fight legal battles against powerful financial institutions. The parliamentary discussions were a testament to the power of speaking truth to power. Molefe's courageous stand, amplified by the voices of his fellow MPs, shone a bright light on the systemic issues within the South African banking sector. The hearings were not just about bank account closures. They were about addressing the legacy of apartheid, about economic justice, and about creating a society where all South Africans have equal opportunities to thrive. The fight is far from over, but the parliamentary discussions marked a significant step forward in holding financial institutions accountable and pushing for meaningful change. The banking industry, faced with mounting pressure and scrutiny, responded to Molefe's allegations with a mix of denial and deflection. Ms. Bongi Kuneni, a representative from the Banking Association South Africa, stood before the parliamentary committee to defend the industry's practices. Kunene vehemently denied any accusations of racism or discrimination, stating that no members had been found guilty of such practices. She emphasized that stringent regulations were in place to prevent discriminatory behavior by financial institutions. Kunene explained the industry's perspective on account closures, emphasizing compliance with regulations aimed at combating financial crimes. She highlighted the finance ombud's role in resolving disputes, as evidence of recourse available to customers. Her arguments, however, did little to quell the concerns raised by Molefe and other MPs, who remained unconvinced by the industry's defense. In the wake of the heated parliamentary debates, one thing became abundantly clear. There is an urgent need for greater transparency and accountability within the South African banking sector. Molefe, along with many other MPs and concerned citizens, has called for stricter regulations and oversight mechanisms to ensure that banks are held responsible for their actions and that discriminatory practices are eradicated. This call for transparency goes beyond simply addressing the issue of bank account closures. It strikes at the heart of the power imbalance that continues to define the relationship between financial institutions and marginalized communities. Molefe, in his impassioned pleas for change, has emphasized that banking is not just a business, it's a public service operating under licenses granted by the state. As such, banks have a responsibility to serve the needs of all South Africans, regardless of their race or economic background. This includes ensuring that all citizens have equal access to financial services and that decisions about account closures are made fairly and transparently, with clear justification provided to customers. The call for accountability extends beyond individual banks to encompass the regulatory bodies tasked with overseeing the financial sector. MPs have questioned the effectiveness of existing consumer protection legislation and called for a comprehensive review of the regulatory framework governing the banking industry. This review, they argue, should prioritize strengthening oversight mechanisms, ensuring that banks are held accountable for discriminatory practices, and empowering consumers with the knowledge and resources to protect their rights. Molefe's bold stand against alleged bank bias has ignited a crucial conversation about the role of financial institutions in creating a more just and equitable South Africa. His call for transparency and accountability is a rallying cry for systemic change, a demand for a financial sector that serves the needs of all citizens, not just a privileged few. The fight for economic justice is far from over, but the momentum for change is building, fueled by the voices of those who have been marginalized and excluded for far too long.